The first 3 weeks of the eruption here in Hawaii, crazy things would happen in the middle of the night. A new fissure would open up and it would threaten a new neighborhood. Thousands of people were evacuated from their homes. I started the Hawaii Tracker Facebook group to help people understand what's going on and get their questions answered.
Hey, how's it going? We're live. This is Fissure 20.
We had hundreds of people all throughout the neighborhoods sending in videos, articles, and images. We spend a lot of time making sure the accurate information gets out.
This is live. Still lava moving.
They weren't just sharing a story, they were helping their neighbor. If a family was being evacuated, the group would just jump in and help out. So it was huge. They were watching out for each other.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for coming. Thank you for the support from everybody.
As we go through this, we're growing closer together as a community. When tragedies like this strike, you really realize how much you need each other.
We are the Hawaiian Volcano Education and Resilience Institute, HVERI for short. A lot of people know us from the 2018 eruption of Kilauea in the Lower East Rift Zone. Working under Hawaii Tracker on the Facebook group. Since then, we've been trying to carry on and take the lessons, the hard lessons that were learned during that eruption and try and prepare for the next major disaster that comes to our island.
Yeah, so we do that through two different programs. One is Volcano Education, and the other part is digital resilience, which we address through online groups on social media. So the way the two programs work together is that the social media networks end up being a distribution pathway for all the information. And having that network in place means we can provide more than just volcano education, but any other preparedness information as well.
What we were working for really came about in the Mauna Loa eruption in 2022. Within hours of that eruption starting, we had the mayor, Mitch Roth, we had USGS HVO Ken Hahn on the stream trying to help flush out a little bit of the ongoing because it's so new. It's completely different from our previous major eruption, which was 2018.
One of the things that Talmadge and I were talking about was how do we deal with social media? It was something we needed to figure out and get right. Our job is to get information to the public and make sure that the public get it as well as possible and as correctly as possible. When Philip and Dane started coming to and live streaming the meetings, it was great because we were reaching more people than we normally would. So when the eruption actually happened, we had this relationship. The interviews we did during the eruption, the most fun ones were the ones with Philip and Dave because they were more relaxed, and we knew we were getting to the local community, and people were asking questions. So those were the best. I think I just want to really give a shout out to those guys and how we worked as a team on this eruption. It really worked out well, and we got to a lot of people we wouldn't have normally gotten.
Aloha, everyone. I'm geologist Philip Ong, here with Mr. Dane DuPont and Lou Ettore from our nonprofit HVERI, the Hawaiian Volcano Education and Resilience Institute. Today is Thursday, April 10th, 2025. We're here to talk about Kilauea's latest episode of its eruption, ongoing eruption that began in the end of 2024. It's episode 17 this past week. And we have some comparisons to talk about some of the old eruptions from the past that had high fountains in episodic fashion as well. So Mauna Ulu and Pu'u'u as well. So that's our menu today. How you gentlemen doing? Dane?
Doing good? Yeah. Just was waiting for the fountains on that last episode. The big ones, you know. So a little bit of change of pace from our 1,000-foot fountains that we've been seeing. But, you know, on track for Tuesdays.
You said it, 1,000-foot fountain. There it was right there. What, 109 days, 17 episodes. And here we are, completely different than the last episode, right? What a show.
Interesting. Well, there's always a wrench in the pattern, right? We're always looking as humans to try to identify what's the same, what's different, and then we have to keep doing it because it's always something we don't expect, one way or another. So we'll dive into the details of all that. Dana will be leading discussion on chat as usual, collecting questions as well. Anything else, gentlemen, before we get into it here?
I think that's it.
All right, so let's get our screen switched over here. And all right. Oh, well, there we go. Aloha, everyone. This is our Hawaiian volcano summary for April 10th, 2025. The 17th episode of Kilauea's ongoing summit eruption began Monday night, April 7th at 10:15 p.m. and lasted 35.5 hours until 9:45 a.m. on Wednesday morning. Episode 17 was unique in that it produced the shortest lava fountains in a while, the shortest one since episode 7 back in late January. The fountains in episode 17 peaked around 200 feet or 60 meters high. You're seeing here some video of the second day of the eruption as it was winding down and the fountains were dropping in size a bit here. If we look at a plot of the maximum fountain height during each episode, you can see here episode 17 is the lowest since late January and breaks a pattern that we had our last two episodes reaching 1,000 feet during episodes 15 and 16 here. So from the S2 camera in the south, the time lapse shows eruption starting at night, tiny bit of glow. Action comes from the south vent, and later on a north vent joins in, but primarily we're erupting from the south vent during this episode. The fountains don't get very high, but they feed this continuous stream of lava into the crater of Halemaumau, eventually covering 40% of the area of the crater floor, according to the USGS HVO. If we look at the view from the side of the crater, in the B2 view, we see lava flow come across overnight. And then we see this bulging of the crater floor as lava appears to inject beneath this crust and move from the vent area towards the camera to the east here, about the same time as the fountains shut off. So this is something we've seen in the past in other episodes, that the lava injects, diverts from the fountains and injects beneath the crust, and the episode shuts off. And correspondingly, if we look at the B1 camera further from the east, we see the source at the western part of the crater floor, followed by the ooze-ups on the eastern part after all the fountains are over and the lava has stopped flowing through the overflow channels here. So that's a typical sequence we see there. This is all happening still within Halemaumau, the inner crater of the main caldera of Kaluapele on Kilauea Volcano in Hawaii Volcanoes National Park, with the vents at the southwest. And we have an image taken of the thermal layout with that long lava river all the way to the eastern part of the crater floor. And doing so in a series of stages, first from the vent to a perched lava pond, through channelized overflows, and similarly to what we saw last week, having distal ooze-outs in the eastern part of the crater floor there. As before, the eruption has resumed inflating following the deflation that accompanied the episode. And according to the USGS, which records these official start and end times for the eruption here, the next episode, episode 18, is likely to begin in the next 5 to 8 days, according to preliminary data. Otherwise, it's been fairly quiet in the volcano. Earthquakes are pretty low. Hardly any signal under the summit, and mostly we see the south flank and the Pahala zones. Even they are in reduced activity. Looking at the main impact of this eruption, it's still gas and the tephra, including Pele's hairs. This satellite capture of the SO2 cloud is showing that the winds were largely blowing this material to the southwest and then wrapping it offshore of Hawaii Island, limiting the impact to some degree. If we look at the VMAP forecast dashboard, we can see that looking at the particulate matter, there is still some of that SO4 in the area of the Kona coast, but it looks to be clearing out with continuing dominant trade winds here over the next 48 hours or so. We can look at the impact on our citizen science monitoring network through Purple Air and see that there are some elevated particulate readings on the Kona coast, although nothing extremely alarming. That's our summary for Kilauea. On Mauna Loa, it's still very quiet. Here are only a few earthquakes under the summit area, all of small magnitude. Earthquakes per month over the last 5 years. Shown here shows how low we continue to shake the volcano, even as it continues to inflate with magma. And we know that because as we track this up and down GPS monitor at Mauna Loa summit, we can see that it's continued to rise for all of the last year here. And that's your Hawaiian volcano summary for today. Okay, so we'll move on to our hazard summary. And I'll start off by showing you guys some of these time lapses from the cameras. I'm going to start with the K2 camera today. And this is the one that's on that tower at Wekahuna, near the construction site ongoing up there. In the past, we've seen the lava fountains peak above the rim, but since this episode did not have those high fountains, we're not going to see that. Instead, we can use this to look at the output of gas. So I've put it back to about a week ago here, and we can just let it play. And you can see the gas emitting from here is actually fairly significant over this past week following the last episode. Sometimes we've seen not as much gas produced, but it continues to be produced. The eruption begins. You can see it's all blowing away from the camera that way across the Kau Desert there. And that's what kept the impact mostly from people for this last episode. Here's a different camera from the south flank of Mauna Loa, the KP camera. So this is just going back for the episode itself. There is a trade wind pattern blowing all that wind to the southwest. Here comes the glow of the eruption. All that increased gas cloud continues blowing left to right on our screen, which is to the southwest there. And eventually we come to today and we see that the same thing it's been pretty steady. So that's how our winds typically keep this impact away from our nearby communities. We have not had that luxury as eruption began in midwinter here, but it seems like maybe the weather pattern is changing a little bit, and hopefully it'll keep the impacts away from people for further episodes as well. So once again, we like to rely on VMAP, VOG Measurement and Prediction Project out of the School of Ocean and Earth Science and Technology at University of Hawaii at Manoa. If you've never been to this page before, they have all kinds of links over here on the left. We usually go to this VOG model, VOG dashboard. I think it's right here, this model, right? So that looks like this. And we can look at both the raw SO2 and the particulate matter. So right now it's just the pure SO2 is usually more impactful closer to the source, closer to Kilauea. So you see it largely here, but also being caught in the onshore offshore of Kona. And you see some remnants there as well. But if I click over here to the particulate matter, you'll see a clear increase because especially over time with reaction of those ingredients with the water in the atmosphere and accelerated by the sunlight, it produces all these little particles that creates that hazy blockage of the view that we see as a VOG that's common over here in Kona during our Kilauea eruptions. So there it is, and fairly limited impact elsewhere. Just showing this as a point of difference from what we've seen in the last few weeks here. And likewise, we can go to our state air quality data and check it out. It looks like all of Hawaii Island is in the green. One anomalous point in Maui, probably not the volcano. We go to purple air once again, and we see a little bit more data density and perhaps a truer assessment of the impacts with elevated readings here in this area of Central to South Kona. Closer to the source at Hawaii Volcanoes National Park, everything is in the green on the map. You see they have winds at 9 miles an hour, 4 meters per second from the north-northeast, leaving a concentrated plume in that shaded zone right over there, so away from all the viewing areas into the closed area of the park, away from people. So that is the park map, and we can check in on the charts, which go back a little bit further in time, and quickly scan. Some of these are offline. It looks like construction at the site. But where readings are coming in, everything has been in the green for the last 24 hours here. We can look at the mounts imagery for the SO2 captures. So here's all the other times. Here's last week's capture when we had all this material blowing north towards the other islands. And the following capture there, you see it's still lingering. It starts clearing out. We have some clear days here in between episodes until this most recent capture here where it sees clearly to the south there. And it's just adding another puff to the global stream here. So looking at the windy.com SO2 layer, there you can see we continue to add to this patch at SO2. And this satellite's capturing a whole atmosphere here, so I don't think this is all down at surface level where anyone on the ground or on ocean would necessarily be in it, but it's certainly in these areas between the surface and the satellite there, somewhere in the strata. So that's our hazard update, and we'll continue to earthquakes, which are always a hazard, right? And sometimes a little slower than others. So this week is one of those times where things are a little bit slower. We have plotted on here the last week of earthquakes, plotted colored by depth. So these purples and blues all through here is a deep Pahala zone hotspot source. We have some other settling earthquakes around the island's perimeter, all around there. And then the yellows and oranges are more of that flank event. So we see the flank of Mauna Loa, maybe one small adjustment, the flank of Kilauea, a couple of small adjustments there. And then the flank of Kamaehua Kanaloa, formerly known as Loihi down here, also showing some of those events. And then one shallower event here, South Kona, or just around Pahala area, magnitude 2, another one of these shallower adjustments is what I'm trying to say here. So if we zoom in on some of these interesting areas, probably the first thing that we don't usually see is down here. You can just see those cluster of events there. 3.8, 3.7, 3.1, 3, 3.5, and a 2.4. So some sizable events all in there. Can't quite see it so easily from this layer right here, but we'll show you a different version of that here in a minute. Otherwise, we can look in more closely at Kilauea, Mauna Loa, and there's really very little going on there. 2.1 on the south flank, 1.9, and a couple really small events under the summit. So not much to even talk about there. It's really, really low overall. Here, earthquakes over the last week, plotted by time. So all of these are older than 2 days, except for this orange one right here. And so we can zoom in a little more and see there is our 3.8. And if we look at the times, it's a little bit shuffled in here, right? But it actually begins on the 6th. There's the 2.4, 2.4, then the 3.1. Then we have 3.0 precursor, the main shock at 3.8 at 2:54 a.m. on the 7th. And then we have the 3.7 and 3.5 that follow later in the day as well there. So here we can come and let's change our background to ocean. And that right there is the summit of Kamaehua Kanaloa summit crater right there. That's the long mountain, Loihi, as it was originally called there. So this looks like it's on the flank over there, more or less, right? You have to keep in mind that when we're locating events that are offshore, the location has more error because you don't have the events surrounded by seismometers. They're all on one side because they have to be on land. So that usually creates some error. So it's not quite clear if this cloud goes here, or maybe it goes here, or maybe it goes. It's hard to say exactly without having some seismologists come do some more work on it for us here. All right, so those are our main earthquakes, and we'll keep it moving here, talk about some monitoring. So we'll begin with the USGS text update sequence here. We'll start on Tuesday, just past midnight, almost 3 a.m. there, a few hours after episode 17 begins at 10:15 a.m. They do note there was a glow that increased at 9:20 p.m. on Monday night, and about 1 hour later, lava is overflowing the south vent to officially begin the episode. So that was the beginning. What's interesting is at the very beginning here, they note UWD tilt has started slight deflation at about the same time as lava began erupting. So this is not something we've seen every single time, right? More often, almost every time, in fact, we see it, the deflation beginning when we have the high fountains actually beginning, right? And we have it, we do have like a leveling off, and so maybe a slight deflation is a little ambiguous there. But that leveling off of the signal is something we've normally seen, but normally it starts crashing down, deflating once the high fountains start pumping out, and we did not see that this past time. It started deflating pretty close to right away there. So that's the first thing to note here on this first update from late Monday night, Tuesday morning. Tuesday's daybreak daily update here notes that the fountains are at 100 feet, 30 meters of maximum height, low levels. And that was it for that moment in time. So Wednesday morning comes 24 hours later. They note that low fountaining continued, that the north vent had become active, overflowed a little bit, and then crusted over, and then eventually collapsed overnight. And you see the deflationary tilt onset was around midnight on April 7th, and it was still continuing on by Wednesday morning there. So in the middle of all this, you probably could come down. Well, so let me pull it back here. Come down to these observations and analysis, and they would say that because of the deflation accompanying the low fountains in episode 17, they thought it unlikely that fountains would get any higher during that episode. So that was the interesting thing there, is there were some clues early on that we wouldn't get exactly the same pattern as before, namely that deflation. We'll get into that a little bit more here as we dive into the data here. So that's the official end of it, announced in the status report Wednesday closer to midday, 10 a.m., as the lava stops overflowing at 9:45 a.m. Fountaining stops, and then it turns into a emission of gas. They note that sustained heights from the south vent were up to 200 feet, 60 meters, sometimes as low as 50 feet, 15 meters. And that the minor north vent activity had stopped at 11 a.m. on Tuesday already still. So that really did not last long at the north vent. So that's all we'll take out of the text there. We'll just jump to the one from today, which does repeat those statistics and notes this 5 to 8 day likely prognosis for the next episode. They are also saying 40 to 50% of the floor of Halemaumau was covered as well. They note the changes in the tilt meters there. They note the onset of episode 17 occurred earlier than forecasted as well. This fountaining began prior to the tilt rebounding to the expected threshold that had been previously associated with episode onsets. So with that caveat, right, and then we got something that was the first sign of something being different. It kind of began earlier than it maybe should have, or than we thought it would. And then we saw different signals, and the high fountains never came in the end. So still noted in these updates is that the power system supplying KW cam, F1 thermal camera, and laser rangefinder that's continuous to the web is still damaged and out of commission. So we'll await eagerly seeing that data back into the stream here. And USGS has updated their timeline here, 35 and a half hours with an ongoing pause. They note a 7-day pause here. This is not quite clear to me how you get 7 days from April 2nd to the 7th here, but there are other questions here in this table, which I think is just kind of think of it as a sketch pad here where they're just doing the quick annotations as they go along, and likely this can be refined a little more. So I've got my own version behind all this that is trying to track this in a slightly different way, but most of the time it matches up, but there's a few times it doesn't here. So once again, to look at our fountain heights by episode, here we are, 200 feet, 60 meters, 17. And you can see how that really broke that pattern. One thing to note is that episode 16 was previously being reported as slightly lower than 15, but they've now, since then, any updates in those text updates and other captions of the photographs repeatedly state that episode 16 also reached 1,000 feet, 305 meters. So it's being plotted that way on this graph here as well. So if you look at where we just reached here, 200 feet, you can see the last time there was episode 7 that was below that. And really that was the time from which we've had this buildup of fountain heights, not uniformly, but overall trending upwards. So we'll see what happens here, what might come from this. And we'll add a little context from Mauna Ulu and Pu'o'o, where they've had episodes that were low vigor in the middle of these other high fountaining episodes as well. There are cases of both eruptions where we have a low vigor episode and then the next episode ends up high fountain again. So that's certainly still a possibility. But there is also a possibility that it's changing in some way more fundamental, that it leads to a change in eruption style and possibly to the end of the high fountaining phase as well. And that's just not clear. It's a wait and see thing as always. And we can all have our own ideas of what matters most and discuss it. And that can be the fun of it here as we educate ourselves to how this volcano works and how we prepare ourselves for it. So as we pointed out before, the now pause vents are still in the southwest, with this progression going across southwest to east-northeast there. There is our most recent thermal map. So really interesting to note. The vent, just a south vent and north vent, not really showing much over here, but spilling through this rapids into the upper perched pond area here. And then it has these secondary overflows. And this one comes over here. This other one works its way all the way across to somewhere right in here, I'll call it. Right? If you zoom in closer to the one way out here, it's not quite clear if this is the same flow or maybe an ooze-up flow right there. But it could be related potentially there, or it could be an ooze-up flow as well. The ooze-up flows were not in full force yet at the time of this scan. There is one shown way down here. And that was the very first ooze-up noted on the cameras. This one occurring at the same time as the fountain is still active. So maybe it was that whatever's happening beneath the crust here, if lava is finding a way to inject, this is that first clear out, flush out signal before the fountain's end, and the main pulse of it that ripples that surface of the crater floor comes across a few hours later. But there are images back April 1st and 2nd from the previous episodes. So there's a beginning of the episode, distortion of the fountain, growing flow at the early part of the eruption. April 2nd, episode 16 still here. You can see the vent channels and scattered ooze outs there, and they offer a zoomed in version as well. Right, vent proximal channels leading to this upper perched pond, secondary channels as spillovers from that pond area. Wherever they may go, they kind of snake their way in different locations depending on which episode it is. And in this capture, you can see more clearly when this was taken, this vent had shut off already. The flows were still moving, but you actually could also see the ooze outs already occurring here on the eastern sector of the crater floor. So pretty fascinating to see that, and still awaiting some petrology, some chemistry results of this kind of lava to have some story told by the scientists of what exactly is happening, or give us more clues of how lava is flushing its way through, if it's picking up the material stored in here, how much, to what proportion, from when. That stuff would all be really interesting to learn about at some point. So we have updated our statistics here. These are still preliminary, and there's some wiggle room and some between some of these boundaries here, but we've now added episode 17, which in total duration was about as long as the previous 3 episodes as well, but does not have a red section. I chose to not note vigorous eruption for that episode there, with that being reserved for those higher fountains there. So similar duration of time, but different pattern as far as distribution of how much vigorous and how much flows are coming out with small fountains. And then we can add in our pause from episode 16 as well. So it falls right in line with the previous whole bunch of them since episode 7 as well, all stacked together there. And episode 17, you have to wait here. We don't have episode 18 to calculate the pause yet. So that's why it looks a little funny there. All right, so that's our updated statistics. We have this week an additional image from INSAR from the Mounts project here. So this is Kilauea's page. It's capturing 12 days from the 4th, and it caught one before in March as well from earlier this month. So in more detail, the way to read these, the scale is over here on the right. So I like to look at, for example, if I'm going towards the center of the crater here, I'm going from blue to red to green. So if I'm starting at blue, I'll have to go to red this way to green. That's away from the radar. So this area is all moving away from the satellite. This is all deflating. Right? So this time frame catches episodes 15 and 16 both, the 2 higher fountaining episodes here. So maybe as a result of that, you're catching this snapshot of deflation across a 12-day window there. A nice clear bullseye. You don't see any extension into the rift at all this way. Maybe a little bit of deflation happening over here as well. These couple little spots there and there. And this one is the opposite pattern. If you're going towards the center, you're going green, red, purple, green, red, purple towards the radar. So it's still a little inflation area right through here, or at least showing uplift on this angle of satellite view. So that's our most recent snapshot. There's more to see here, which is cool, but let me just rewind to the previous one as well, just to point out, in that one, we had this deflation signal. This is only capturing episode 14, just the one by itself. So it's still deflation if you follow that same color sequence towards the center here. So not quite as pronounced. You still have this little inflation bump out here on this upper southwest rift area as well. So pretty interesting to note that too here. And go back one more, and this comes back to the last capture we had, which was back at the end of 2024, December 29th, capturing the actual injection of a dike, this butterfly pattern that's typical of when a dike comes through the middle right there. That began our eruption with the vents now located right along that trace right through there. It's interesting to note that. All right, let me come back to the one we currently have, and let's see if I can get this zoomed in even a little more. Look at more cool stuff. Normally this kind of modeled area with all this mix of colors is where you have vegetation, or it's basically noise is the way to think of it. Thinking of it as noise. And typically this is vegetation, but there was a cool case we saw during the Mauna Loa eruption that they were using that noise as a signal of where the ground had changed in a chaotic manner. In other words, lava flows and deposits of the eruption. So if we look at that, not so much right over here on the right, but in areas like right in here, this is all a collapse pit. They're using this base map of the collapse pit before lava refilled it. Lava's now filled this entire pit over here, and it's lapping all the way onto this edge. And in fact, right there, it looks like it's the edge of the flows on a downdrop block, something like that, right at the snapshot of this capture. And furthermore, not only that, you can see up on the western rim here, this area about like this, that looks like it's all chaotic as well. And that's likely where all the tephra is falling in the downwind part of on the crater rim right through there. And there is this broader deflation underneath that, but that's superimposed on top of it looks like tephra building up more chaotic ground right through there. So that's our most recent capture here from August 4th, the last 12 days. If you look at our previous capture more closely, it has that also. You see there's that same lava flow pattern in there. Slightly different distribution of tephra at that point in time for that capture. Let me flip it so you can see a little bit different. Right? It's a little bit more to the straight west, we'll call it, whereas the one before is a little bit more southwest in its orientation. And that's not something we had early in that first episode. You can see maybe a little bit there. There's maybe a little bit of chaos, but largely you're seeing this dike pattern. So pretty cool to see all of that there. And after I put all this together for you guys, I saw Volcano Watch came out today. And among other things, they actually have this image within it. So let's just skip over the fact that's from Volcano Watch and zoom in on their slide. And so they have a very similar thing here from 327 to 44 distribution of tephra deposits from satellite-derived visualization. Right? So they're actually taking similar satellite passes and they're mapping it in a more intentional way that I'm just capturing what's being produced automatically. And there you have it. There is the accumulation of lava flows in the crater. And there is that blanket of tephra. That you can see that as the wind has blown it around, it kind of concentrates the most right there where it's the darkest green, but it fans out this whole other area as well. Let's see if I can get that even bigger for you guys right there. So pretty cool to have that embedded little piece of data. And that's just what I wanted to mention right here. It fits together with this part of the presentation. Okay, so let's look at some other signals. We'll go to our monitoring signals. Let's get this to the top. All right, so our last week, we still have no data coming in from our laser rangefinder, so it's showing blank here. Our tilt, the summit is showing deflation during the episode, reinflation since. East Rift is showing nothing going on down there at all. Earthquake counts, you can see they jumped up a little bit here, but there's really not that many and no big spikes. And if you look at the depth versus time plot here, there's really not a whole lot of action. It's mostly flank events or Pahala events and the smattering of background flank events over here as well. So nothing really notable there. What's notable is really how few other events there actually are. Normally we see a lot more ink on the map than this. So moving on, here's last month elevation cut off by the high fountains of episode 15 that cut off the power supply to this instrument. There are images of the scientists still measuring this manually, but that stuff isn't getting plotted automatically to the website. So it's still being done. It's just not as convenient for the public to see it here. Here is our combined Summit and East Rift once again for the whole last month. So here we see episode 17, 16, 15, and 14 on the plot. A little bit of the after effects of 13 as well right there. So similar pattern on a sand hill tilt meter there with two components. Usually the green one is a little bit more of the southern component, where the Hale Mau area is usually the blue azimuth here. So what I wanted to point out in this plot, if we look in more detail, the rate of deflation that we got during episode 17 is pretty good. Comes down pretty fast right there, right? But that doesn't really compare to the rate we saw during the previous episodes, where it seems to drop much more steeply. Let's see if I can draw this on here and quickly compare. Right, we're still deflating quite a bit, but we're doing it at a slightly slower rate as well as having this strange synchronicity between the onset of fountaining and the deflation, right? So before it was, you might see this kind of thing happening and then at high fountains and then it would deflate. So the inflation pattern looks pretty normal compared to the other ones we've seen. Still has these daily variations embedded on top of it there. But otherwise, it looks like it's recharging for the next event. And curious why it might have done this. And USGS refers to their threshold of tilt before the fountaining's onset. They're like, for example, if you look at this 5 microradian line right around in there, when you hit that during episode 14, that's when it actually began. We exceeded it for 15, but there it began as well. For 16, right around that area, it began as well. For 17, we really didn't come anywhere close to it. They thought it would last longer before it did that. So that was that earliness, not hitting that threshold, and then declining, but at a slightly slower rate as well. Those are the little clues that the high fountains were not going to be manifesting this time around. All right, so let's keep moving. There's a lot to share with all this action every week. There's our earthquakes per day over the last month. So here you can see more clearly there's no real change in pattern. Yeah, maybe slightly more events here and then the recharge phases, although not quite so clean because this counts are capturing both the south flank and Pahala events that are unrelated to this eruption as well. So there it is for the last year, pretty low ever since the onset of eruption in late December. 1 year summit GPS. So north and south distance across a caldera. This is something that was extending for much of the year, coming upwards. There is an onset of eruption, but since then it's been in this fairly steady window right through here. And so if we look a little bit more closely, maybe if you were to sort of connect maybe the tops of these, maybe you would say, okay, maybe there's a little increase pattern coming up here. And then our most recent event seems to pull it back down towards this average of steady state equilibrium too, right? Where you're having a matching input and output where the ground doesn't have to end up any higher or lower than it was before. It's just transferring everything through that comes in from below to the eruption on the surface. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. There is this 1-2 year GPS plot at the outlet station. And if you haven't seen these plots before, this is 2 years of time now, so everything is extra scrunched in. And we have east-west separated on top from the north-south in the middle, from the up-down at the bottom. So I'm usually, as a quick hack, looking at the up and down signal. And what you can see here is that since December, we've had the station going down, actually dropping down at the outlet station. And the question is, what's happening here at the very right end? Is it possibly doing a slight little blip upwards? Is something we have some slight rearrangement of what's going on there. So we'll have to keep tracking that. But overall, it does look like it's not quite as steady state. There is a little bit of deflation happening here, as was also suggested by our INSAR image, our satellite images there too. So that's the summit GPS there. And we'll go down to the Middle East Rift at Pu'u'o. And here, the last 1 year, this is the typical pattern of contraction there. We had an intrusion that was then followed by an eruption on the Powell crater at the Middle East Rift. That's all this mess through here. And following that, and following the beginning of eruption at the summit, it had resumed this pattern of steadily contracting. It has some noise, there's some variation bouncing around in there. Maybe the south flank movement is affecting exactly how noisy this is. And then here at the very right end, you can see maybe in the last week to 10 days or so, it seems like we have the appearance of an uptick in this pattern here. And so this is worth investigating further. Sometimes this kind of thing appears just within the noise of the data. Like here's an example of that kind of thing where it looks like it's rising up and averages out later on. So curious to see what's happening there. We can dive into it a little bit more. The first thing to look is the Pu'u'o 2 year GPS as well. So likewise, east, west, and top, north, south, in the middle, and up, down. The most important one in our case, Pu'u'o is still dropping downwards. So that ground is still basically settling, even if it is settling in some cases, settling more apart and sometimes more together at the surface. Right? The important thing is it's settling downwards. So not to say that that is going to stay that way forever. It's something to be aware of, but we can keep looking just to make sure. Here is a tilt meter at Pu'u'o showing steady deflation as well, and nothing really to talk about there. Maybe some slight little bumps from the rain and other effects like that. But that's basically it. So for further assurance, and because we haven't done this in a little while, we'll turn to the Nevada Geodetic Laboratory GPS map here. We have all these stations all across. I've got some picked out in particular. We have Puhimau going down the East Rift, and what we're looking at here is the pink data is the most recent stuff. The blue is, in this case, from 2024. Right? The important thing here is, up and down, we're actually dropping down slightly, and we're actually fairly steady in all three of these components, not really moving much in any direction at all since the data is showing here at the beginning of 2025. So that's the upper East Rift connector. You get down into the Middle East Rift close to Mauna Ulu towards Makapui area. And now our plot's showing way back to 2010 or so, right? So it's a lot more compressed, but still, when we look closely, there's not a whole lot of spread there. It doesn't seem to be moving very much, especially in these other two components. And up and down maybe it's moving a little bit more, but if anything, I would say it looks like it's coming down in that direction. Hard to say there, but all within a fairly small window compared to the changes we've seen in the past year, 2018 and 2024. So further down, KERZ, also pretty steady, all three components. And further beyond Pu'u'u, RKAR, a little bit more zoomed in. So you have more spread in the data, but nothing unusual in the spread here compared to what you're seeing with the trends that are already set. So all looking good over in East Rift. The reason this is worth looking to a little bit more now is because it's valid to ask, well, what changed at the summit? Did we not get as much hot, fresh magma to cause that big fountain to come up? Was it diverted somewhere else? Did it mix with more of the older, cooler magma? Did it possibly go into the East Rift? Might be a question that comes up. And so here we can basically look at that and be like, doesn't look like it's happening at all. It seems like it's all caught in the summit. Whatever's going on seems to be localized and constrained to there. So that's a whole bunch of monitoring information there. I think we can leave that at that and just wrap it up this first half before our break with the Volcano Watch that I referred to earlier. This week's is a focus on the National Volcano Information Service, which is part of the National Volcano Early Warning and Monitoring System, which looks like news, but it's got a V in there. So NViews, authorized by Congress in 2019. So NViews is that overall system, and within it, they have this NVIS, National Volcano Information Service, which is basically the IT branch. They're using this Tephra map example as a way that data is coming into the observatory through partners in Europe, like the Italian Space Agency, that use the data to create the map. And it goes into a lot of detail of how important all this IT coordination and storage actually is. I won't get into the details of all that, but great to see they're thinking about that. And they'll be curious to see how our data streams evolve or change here in the future. If we'll maybe get more GPS stations updated, or we'll see how who's maintaining, how they're putting out information, if they put out any new information, whether we keep the same style that we've had on the website since the 1990s, and we'll see. But that's Volcano Watch this week. And with that, I will pass it over to Dane and Lou here.
All right. Well, thank you, Phil. Let's go ahead and get Lou in here. We'll see you in a minute there, Phil. Thank you. Hey, Lou.
Hey.
How you doing?
It was good. Phil was answered all the questions that I've been seeing for the last couple of days from everybody. One of them was on the rift zone, if it was moving. So interesting.
Yep.
Good stuff. Well, shall we jump into our community corner here?
Yeah, let's do it. What do you got for us?
Let's see if I can add this to stage. There we go. Thank you. All right. Well, as we know, things are still in progress up at the park. It's still closed for extensive renovations of the visitor center. We've got the Yellow Jackets, and still trying to discourage people from running around in restricted and closed areas. Established eruption viewing overlooks are in place for your safety. The small void is still there. Wahine Kapu, watch your step. And there's some safe driving tips we keep bringing up every week, I guess for the last 17 weeks. How much traffic is in the park? It has been slowing down quite a bit since the beginning of the first episodes till now. But
Has it?
Yeah, when you get up there during the day, there's like 2 cars, 3 cars at the gate, and that was different because we were all the way out to the highway at 2:00 in the afternoon before.
Interesting.
Yeah, and they are charging at the gate, so have your cards ready. Reminder: bring your own water. I threw up some fancy graphics for us, Dane. A little recraft. Visitors to Hawaii Volcanoes National Park need to plan ahead and bring plenty of water, of your own drinking water for now. The water station at Kilauea Visitor Center is unavailable during the renovation closure. A bottle filling station will be reinstalled at Waikahuna once it opens in the weeks ahead. So that is encouraging. They got some benches up there and the bathrooms are there, the original ones. In the meantime, water is available for purchase at Volcano House, and I'm sure at KMC there.
Right.
There's the viewing areas. I highlighted them with eyeballs to make it easier, and as well as the restricted areas. Take a look at this shot. This is a new shot.
The rolling trusses.
Yep, they're building. That is if you're looking at the visitor center, it's to the left of it, where they're putting the new pavilion. So they are making progress. I was excited to see that in the park. It's the first building other than HVO's building going up that I noticed up there. There are no programs. The After Dark and the programs and the Leamanu are all suspended until the visitor center opens again. Last week I mentioned that there was an event at Kahuku, so stay tuned for any of those events that might come up. There is KMC, the new Kilauea Welcome Center at the KMC camp there. And then the picture there, I also have the benches and the existing bathroom, which will hopefully open soon. The Paleo Lab, Unit 2, Oceans of the Past, Dinosaurs of the Deep from Imi Loa is going on right now. Wednesday, April 16th. If you got kids, I encourage you to go to these. They are fantastic. They do a great job there. Save the date. Mauna Kea Stewardship and Oversight Authority community meeting. If you've followed us for the last couple of years, we have live streamed a lot of the community meetings, especially the ones that came up preceding the Mauna Loa eruption. And if you're in the community, it's always good to attend these. This is in Waimea. There is something going on at the park on Saturday, April 12th at 8:45. It is Stewardship at the Summit. Come out and help the park and the Aina by cutting invasive Himalayan ginger on the park trails. Dane, have you ever gone up and done this?
Yeah, all the time.
I knew you did.
Actually,
one of my buddies, he did this.
Looks like Phil might have.
Phil probably has done this.
Phil has. Phil's done this.
Yeah. It's a lot of work, but my buddy that went up and did that, he says it's a lot of fun. Work is often in the shade of the forest with sweet sounds of native honey creepers above to serenade you as you work. What more could you want? Water, snacks, rain gear, and sun protection are recommended. The hike is around 1 mile moderate round trip, leaving from Kilauea Visitor Center parking lot. The hike involves walking over rough, uneven terrain on a dirt and rock path with up to 400 feet elevation change. It's 3 hours and 15 minutes. It'll probably fly by. There is a lot of people that enjoy this, and there's a lot of camaraderie goes on. Life on the Edge is another one. I have yet to find anybody. I've been trying to track down somebody that's gone and done this tour. I always encourage going and talking with the rangers and having them take you on this tour. I'm going to have to go do this myself because these guys, men and women, are both extremely knowledgeable of the park. You learn about Hawaii geology, culture, plants, and animals at 10 a.m., 11, 1 p.m., and 2 p.m. Ranger programs may be canceled due to staffing issues, hazardous weather, or volcanic conditions. Visit the Kilauea Welcome Center for more information about location and status of these programs. So this is going on every day. Check in at the Welcome Center to find out what's going on. And the second annual Hula is Life celebration is going on April 22nd, starting at 5 p.m. Experience the magic of Hilo style vibes. Dane, we've got Merry Monarch coming up this month, don't we? I don't hear you. No audio.
Just looking that up, April 20th to 26th is Merry Monarch.
Merry Monarch, yeah.
So it's right in. Yeah, it's right in the middle of Merry Monarch.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Gonna be a busy month.
Yes, sir.
And as well as April is Tsunami Awareness Month. So head down to the Pacific Tsunami Museum between now and the end of the month. Check out their exhibits, learn about the history of tsunamis and the impact that it's not had just around the world, but especially in Hilo and around the island. There's a lot of stories here. The individuals that work and volunteer at the museum have amazing knowledge of the history here. So check it out. And if you did not subscribe to our newsletter, it is now live. April is available. I put it in the link, put the link in the chat as well. It's on our website, hvery.org. You can check out the April newsletter, but I encourage you while you're there to subscribe so that you don't miss it and it ends up in your email box. And there we go, Dane.
All right. Well, thank you, Lou. And now we get to the section thanking everybody. I'd like to start off by thanking the Kilauea Recovery, Puna Strong, and Bye Bye Grant programs, all put on by the county through Kilauea Recovery and County Council, and is also administered by Hawaii Community Foundation. We appreciate all of them and all the support they've given us to help get this program, as well as our digital resilience and youth development off the ground and maintaining them. So we appreciate that. We also like to thank everybody that tuned in today. You know, the likes, the subscription, subscribes, all that stuff does help with the algorithm. Not everybody says it, but trying to get this content out there just as much as we can, and every little bit helps. So we like to thank those, as well as everybody that's made donations. We have a list running by there, and if you do want to make donations, we take those over on hvery.org/donate. And we also do take super chats. We do take more home when we use the website, though. So we appreciate everybody that's helped us out there. And I think that gets us through it.
That's it. You did it.
All right. Well, thank you, Lou, for joining us. Anything before we send you out and get Phil back in here?
I think we're good.
All right.
Right on.
See you next time.
All right.
And welcome back, Phil.
All right.
So what do you got in the second half for us?
Let's see here. We'll start with our Kilauea observations, and I was going to give Lou a shout out there for, you can tell he's been in Hawaii for a while, and he sees the word paleo, comes out paleo, which is how you'd say it from Hawaiian.
Right.
I enjoyed that, Lou. I do the same thing here when you start reading things in Hawaiian pronunciation. It turns out to be a Greek word instead, right? What can you do?
Yeah. I did one the opposite way the other day. It was something. I was like, something one. They're like, no, it's one. I was like, oh, whoops. I just saw one and just didn't even think.
So let's start off with some photo and video releases from the USGS. They have the catch up on episode 16 to start off here. So there is this page from April 7th that has a time lapse as well as the thermal images I've showed you guys already. The time lapse will play for you guys here. Just as a point of comparison as well for what you're going to see next, this is the episode 16 high fountain. They're now saying over 1,000 feet high. I'll show you the caption here in a few seconds. But there you see that overflowing pistoning from the north vent on the right with the high fountains and the south vent in the center left there. And interesting to see areas like down in here where the cone is evolving and changing and flowing. Pieces of the cone are getting rafted off into the river here. Pretty fascinating to see this. What's really nice and different about this is there's more frames in here, right? They actually are giving us images every single minute as opposed to what happens to go to time-lapse camera every 10 minutes online or something like that. So a little smoother view here. Cool to see this progression all the way through the night, episode 16. And then the fountains start decreasing a bit. And winds down and shuts itself off. So that was episode 16 there. And We'll continue to the photo release from episode 17. So this is that first phase of it there. So we can see those lower fountains. Well, actually, before I do that, let me come back to this April 7th and just point out here once again, there's a time-lapse video, episode 16, reached heights of 300 meters, 1,000 feet right there. So there's that citation for that. So, all right, opening phases of 17, lower fountains there, 100 feet, 30 meters. Photo by Mike Zoller there. There's our web camera instrumentation there, the S2 camera over on the left. There you can see that fountain. What's cool from this angle here is it looks like there's a little extra vent, maybe something going on back here. Right, this is something that's we haven't been documenting that much. It hasn't been come up in really many of the text updates. But when I dig through some of our comparison documentation from Manaulu and Pu'o, they talk about some of the episodes that somehow end up opening more vents and then end up spreading out the pressure through some of the areas. It just shows a little bit of the changes happening underground as well. So all the stuff against the crater wall up here is all this spatter and rubble that's fallen down from the fountain. So it's completely possible that some pressure or lava could squeeze up from right under there and leak out over there, for example. So I really like seeing these zoomed in images for that kind of thing. You can see that. And there's our north vent, a big sulfur bank right on the rim of the cone, and then one higher up as well. Interesting to note. There's a north vent where the lava reaches the top through this pistoning, starts overflowing. It mostly had these minor little flows leaking off of the pond before it hardened at the top there, which you can see here. There's that hardened crust around sunset on Tuesday there, as that south fountain continues, feeding that big river with rapids and standing waves in it right through here as well. Here's Tuesday afternoon, and we see the geologists up here on the rim near where the cameras were impacted. And it notes here, geologists are taking laser rangefinder measurements of lava fountains at the active vent below them within the crater. So here you can see some of the work USGS is doing in response to all this activity. Then there's one more day of releases. Things were released yesterday. More views of the last phase of episode 17. So Wednesday morning now, they're flying over. They can continue to see the vent fountaining and flowing out. They see lava flows fed by the fountains, which they're able to approach and sample. There is approaching and sampling those flows for analysis. A fountain with a nice rainbow there. Showers passing through. There's another one of these Pahoehoe lobes. Interesting to note what it looks like up close. I think I see inflation. Some areas look like more fluid Pahoehoe, and some areas like right back here look like more of the slabby Pahoehoe, where you're having maybe some kind of crust or other hardened part of the lava is getting rafted along as well. So, big range of textures out there. And then they also have this video, which we started off playing you guys at the very top of the hour here, as well as the most recent map. And it's worth pointing out that this most recent map does not have a total volume available, so we can't really say anything about that. We can say that right now, 167 feet, 51 meters as a maximum thickness. So you think over here in the western part near the vents, right? So I did a little bit of math to calculate where we are compared to where we were before 2018. And the answer is about 200 feet below the floor of Halemaumau before it collapsed is where this thickest lava actually is now, which means that in these most recent images we have, the height of the fountain right through there, about the height of that cone through there, that's about that original depth of Halemaumau. So it makes sense. You can see. Let me pull that back just so I can point that out again. You can see from the right here, this is the area of the original crater floor depth, and you follow it around, and you're getting around to this vent height elevation right through there as well. There's our north vent inactive after it collapses overnight to Wednesday morning, and the south vent still going Wednesday morning. And look at this ribbony texture right through there. Those are our lava rapids and standing waves in that big channel that's flowing across the crater floor there. There's our big perch pond. Maybe I'll rewind it and try to pause it there. There's our big perch pond all through here, right there. And with this more smooth surface, lava's all ponded in there. And here you see the secondary overflow channel leading off across the crater right there as well. Closer views of the fountaining there. So that cone we expect is somewhere on the order of 50 meters, 160 feet or so, right? So this is in that waning stage. Lava is still low fountaining here and feeding this river that's moving across all these, looks like chunks of cinder that rafted away from the growing cone there. And there's probably buried underneath the rapids right there. So pretty cool to see that. And speaking of those rapids, we're going to go and turn to our friend of the program, meteorologist Jennifer Myers, and show you here what she's pointed out during the height of those fountains at 200 feet from the south vent right there, partially obscured. You can calculate the amplitude of that standing wave. 30 feet tall standing wave is what she's calculated based on this. And let's let this thing play. You can see there flow was coming through, and that standing wave is just continuing to stay there. It doesn't quite let me zoom in any more than that. So then we have Bayshore Towers, 134 feet for comparison. Give you some idea of how big these waves are. And so remember, for many years going to different eateries in Hilo, I've seen some pictures of Pele surfing the waves, and I thought that was really some fanciful thinking, but here you go. There's her wave, 30-foot tall standing wave right there. So yeah, mahalo to Jen Myers, and that's what she says there. The molten rock is over 2,000 degrees, so when waves like this form in rivers or channels, it can be surfed until they dissipate, which could last for hours. So just referring this to rivers of water, which you see this kind of thing in as well. So pretty cool. Let's turn now to our time-lapse observations, and we'll start off with the V1 camera here. So we're zoomed in, looking at the north vent. We still see some kind of slumping movement of there before the episode even starts. And there comes the episode from the south vent, pistoning from the north vent. It collapses, and the south vent keeps flowing before it wanes. And eventually, you see this lava pond itself having a crest overturning episode last night, 2 nights after this is over. So pretty fascinating to see all of that. There's that overturning vent. There it is, and a bit more of a dusk light to make it clearer what's going on after they zoomed it out. Yeah, and so here's where that standing wave is located, right in there as well. Let's turn to the V2 camera. Different angle, looking more from a volcano house area. So with a massive amount of fume, you can see some slumping, sulfur accumulation. There's a south vent, overflow from the north vent. Lava sweeping around, and the cone then sagging in, and the lava pond overturning after everything is done there. Since the camera's moving around, it's not the smoothest animation there, but I thought I'd put it in here for completeness, and since we're short, a couple cameras that we like to rely on as well. So the S2 is a little better. It's fixed in the same point of view here. There is north vent on the right, south vent on the left with all this fume at the end of the eruption. Let's pull it back to the start. No glow at all the previous night. And then it pops out straight to an overflow within an hour. Fountains don't get that high. Lava keeps moving out there. North vent has come up, spilled over, and everything is retreated by this point in time. So that was it. I'll do it once more, but let me zoom it way in so you can see more of this vent area. Actually, it does bounce around a little bit. Maybe some wind or something wiggling that tripod out there. You can see the sides of the cone moving in and slumping in here once it's all over. and the massive fume taking over. Okay, so here's a view from the Volcano House National Park Service camera with a little bit wider view. We were looking at this the last few weeks and seeing the fog blowing towards the camera. Don't see so much of that here. It's more of what you might see from the distance here from Volcano House, for example. I like to get it a little bit more zoomed in than that. So here's a zoomed in version of the same thing. Play it from the start there. And there it is. And you can see there's two branches, one that leads off the south part of the crater and one that comes out to the north part of the crater here as this thing develops over that 36 hours. And just a couple more cameras to go through. There are the B cameras. The B2 camera is right here. So here is our clip of the eruption beginning at night. Flows sweeping. There's a north branch. Here's a south branch coming towards the camera right over there. And here comes our rising of the crater floor. Let's loop this one for you guys to see. Sun goes down. Or, yeah, it looks like moonset actually there. And here comes that rising crater floor. Pretty interesting, right? You see the flows come across first. The flows and fountains stop. You can see this flow over here, outflow, is still moving at the very tail end, as at the same time as the whole crust of this covered lake is bulging upwards. It starts over here and it progresses its way towards the camera in this direction, to my eye at least. Here it comes one more time. After the night, fountains are off. Here comes the bulge. So you can easily see how you might associate the end of fountaining with this injection of lava under the crust here. It's still coming out the vent. Now it's off. And here comes pressure under the crust all the way across. And here is all of the last week for comparison in just a daytime view. So no, nothing's moving until that phase, right? So before the eruption, as the eruption begins, nothing's changing anywhere on this crater floor until now. And so that's the thing to point out there, which is fascinating to me here. Yeah, and then following that, here's our B1. There's that north branch that turns out to go all the way across the crater floor there. The south branch comes over here. And then here's our ooze-ups all the way at this other end. So let's pull it back open again. And let me slow it down actually for us this time here. So lava's coming across, and then you see the ooze-ups come up right where the lava is flowing across it. I don't know if that was something that was discernible to all you guys. And then you have more ooze-ups coming in that following evening all through here. So let's let it wind again from the beginning. It's all darkness in this part of the crater floor. Here comes a flow from the left, right there. Ooze-ups right there in the foreground, right ahead of that, right? So interesting to note that. And let me pull it back to this other area over here. And so here is the fountains are off, overturning of the lava lake, the lava pond, and also ooze-up flows here in the foreground. Okay, so now we're back to the beginning. First flow. The very first ooze-up's going to pop up over in this area right over here, while the fountain is still going. Fountain's still going, flows are still coming. Here's our ooze-up. Here's actually another point right in there as well. So you can see there was something that, while it was still going, found some path through there to cause the ooze-up, and then a few hours later, most of the lava pressure comes that way and the fountain is shut off. So I'm kind of curious how all that works together. We have seen many other eruptions or episodes of this eruption shut off in a similar manner, where we see injection under the crust, even the higher fountain ones. So I would hesitate to say that that in and of itself was the cause of our lower fountains this last episode. Maybe it's why it ended when it did. But we have seen, I would say, probably at least 6 other times. I haven't gone back and counted, but it's been fairly common to see that over time here. So that's the story of what happened here in episode 17. And to present, we now have a view of the V1 camera live. Lots of fuming from the perch pond area, which now seems to be completely still. And different point of view from the V2 camera. This does not show live. Let's go live. And there it is, lots of fume coming up across the crater floor there as well. So that's the visuals. You got something to add, Dane?
Yeah, I was just saying, like, it was interesting at the V1. I think this is V2, right? Over here. So yeah, from the V1, it almost looks like that plume has steam in it to me. I don't know. It almost does. It's just like, where the hell is it getting water from? Type of thing, if it is, but from the other view, it looked more like, I was going to say something and you change views. I'm like, okay, that looks more like fog, just fog.
Yeah, some of the other eruptions, I forget which one. Maybe it was Mauna Ulu. Pu'u'o maybe had some as well, where towards the end of that eruption, they did think that there was water getting into the system. It wasn't happening during the episode, but when it was over, something like there was some water nearby, and similarly, they were trying to figure out where is the water coming from, and they were trying to figure out, well, maybe there was some shallow groundwater perched in here, and in these areas of the rift zone that have dikes. We saw in this similar area after the 2018 collapse, that big dark streak on a crater wall where a lot of the water leaked out of there, and we saw there was like kind of a small little aquifer that kind of gets wedged up in there. So maybe there's something there that could add some water.
Yeah.
So
it just does look like steam, like there, and like you look out over the crater floor and you see all that SO2, and then you go over to the main plume and it's just like, but it looks like there's steam in there, like it's so fluffy. Essentially, that view not as much, maybe. Right. It doesn't look like maybe as much, but that first view, it's like really makes me think,
might be mixed in there. Yeah, if you look, look above the crater rim here, where the sunlight's coming through, it does seem to have some color in it too, like it still has that fog nature too. So maybe it has a higher water content, and be a great thing to try to learn. See if the USGS has something like that to share with us at some point. So, all right, we have a few minutes. Maybe I should come back to our volcano awareness presentation. That is going to be, we're going to talk about two different episodes that occurred here, right? One is Mauna Ulu. So here's Mauna Ulu's maximum fountain heights. This is all 1969. You can see how they progressed. Like the first few episodes are usually like fissure opening, and it's kind of focusing its event and all of that. So you see it's not quite as clean a progression. They do split 12 into 12A and 12B, so you might consider this together to be one taller bar, right? But of all these, what you can look at is the anomaly is episode 10. So I thought we could look at episode 10 of Mauna Ulu and just see what was going on there. And similarly, here's a plot of fountain heights from Pu'u'o's eruptive high fountain era. And you can see through here, there's like a lot of variations, and overall kind of definitely climbed up and then it went down. So it is possible to have decreasing fountains here, leading to the end of an eruption, for example. But there also are cases, we're going to look at episode 19, which is this one right in here, which in the middle of this, in the ramp up of the high fountaining phase, had this one lower output episode as well. So not to say this is exactly how it's going to go for us. I have no idea what's going to happen. We'll wait and see. But I'm just trying to add some context of, can it go this low and then come back up by showing these two examples from the past, right? So starting with Mauna Ulu's episode 10, we are looking at, this is professional paper, I forget which one it is now, but chronological narrative of the 69-71 Mauna Ulu eruption. And there's all kinds of cool stuff in here. I might actually deviate a little bit to point out a couple of cool lava stories that are embedded in here. So to begin with, our episode is going to be, episode 10 is going to be October 10th to 13th. But let's go back to see what's happening that month beforehand, right? And so this helps inform a couple of things. One is how they're defining their episodes, and two, what's normal in between their high fountaining phases as well, right? Okay, so activity much like that before, the previous fountaining typified this period. The lava column was confined to two compartments in the western vent area, except for brief overflows on September 27th and October 2nd to 3rd. Underwent repeated rise and fall cycles. So it sounds pretty similar there, yeah? Again, lava column in the western compartment began rising after that eastern compartment, but it ended higher They give some statistics. I'll skip over some of those there. Spatter ejected during particularly vigorous periods of fountaining between September 26th and 29th began to close the eastern compartment and build a small cone on a bridge between the two compartments. Okay, let's pause here and we scroll down to this famous image right here. There are two geologists in the vent of Mauna Ulu. This right here is glow from a spattering source, that higher spatter. That's the spatter is what's leaving all this gunk over here, which they've crawled down onto to stand on to look into further, right over here, right? Note overhang on which men stand, built since September 26 by accretion of spatter and one overflow fissure. Here they are 2 days later on land that wasn't there 2 days prior to that. Right? Spattering column of lava is what's the glow underneath this overhang right over here. So you can see that they're of a different constitution, we'll say, than we are today, and operating in a different kind of way, right? So they're down in there, not just Mauna Ulu, but Pu'u was going to be the same way as well. So they note, for some periods of several hours, the columns in both compartments remained at approximately constant height, continuously bubbling. Eventually, a crust formed on each of the columns, which then began to rise as the volume of gas trapped beneath the crust increased, initiating another sequence of rise and fall activity. Gas escape from the western compartment was strong at times, lasting from several hours to several days without significant let up. A dull glow was visible at night as the wall rock was heated red by hot escaping gas. That's the before, the in between, right? So you can note that unlike what's happening now, lava is overflowing the vent, but they're not calling it an episode beginning here. Their episodes are high fountaining episodes in this very paper, at least. So the 10th episode of sustained high fountaining started at 9 a.m. October 10th and lasted for 74 hours, nearly twice as long as any other fountaining episode of the eruption. It was characterized by low, often dome-shaped fountains and a low rate of discharge. Both compartments of the vent area were active for most of the 3-day period. Remarkably symmetrical dome fountain, occasionally 20 meters high, but usually half of that, often welled from the eastern compartment for periods of several hours. Most of the lava from this fountain flowed away from the vent, but some formed a narrow river that poured back into the western compartment. Every few seconds, gases burst explosively from the western compartment, carrying spatter possibly derived from lava drainback. The activity at both compartments was more episodic during the afternoon of October 12th and morning of October 13th. Spells of activity continuous, tens of minutes long, were punctuated by brief periods when output went to nothing, at which time lava ponded in the vents, draining back into both compartments. The flows of that fountain that went out of the vent entered a light crater, eventually filling that shallow subsidence depression that was created by cooling and degassing of the lava in September, 1 month prior. Lava spilled out of that crater after spilling into it, went 1.5 kilometers south and southeast through the forest, solidifying to rather dense pahoehoe. Several flows went north from there towards Pu'uhuluhulu in a vent, others went short distances to the south. A horseshoe-shaped cone of tephra formed around the west end of the western vent, but not much tephra elsewhere. All of the topography from before the rampart was all covered beneath new flows, although that part was still recognizable as the new flows draped over and mimicked the old rampart. Jagged, sulfur-coated remains of the remnant on the south side of the inactive eastern vent were still sticking up 5 to 8 meters above its base. And I'll skip this last paragraph here there. And that was that episode. And then they basically go to lava was visible in the compartments in between episodes. They could see lava columns rising and falling, sometimes overturning and spattering, heavy showers of spatter accompanying many degassing events. Hot gases carrying Pele's hairs and a small bit of spatter roared from the western compartment, but that's not counted as an episode until they have vigorous fountaining once again on the 20th. Right there, right? So this one, let's talk about this one a little bit as well, which is not why we were here, but episode 11. Lava quickly filled the vent depression, spilled outwards, cascaded into both craters. The fountain was 300 meters, 1,000 feet above the western vent. At 3:30 in the morning, the fountain suddenly developed a strong horizontal component directed toward Pu'uhuluhulu. where observers huddled for protection behind a stone wall. After a few minutes, the fountain gradually returned to vertical, but not before sending a heavy shower onto the lower flank of Pu'uhuluhulu, where the spatter welded into a coherent mass that slid a short distance down a steep slope, leaving slump scars. This right here. There is a side of Pu'uhuluhulu with a slumping of a lava that came out against it. And here's a dome fountain, similar to what they were seeing before. Not that episode, but the next one. And what they note here is left part of the dome is sliding away, revealing that the core is made of lava and that dome is not simply a large bubble. Pretty cool thing for them to be observing and looking into there, right? So back to the lava hitting the slopes there. This frightening interlude was probably occasioned by collapse of the bridge between the two compartments, temporarily choking the vent and deflecting the fountain jet toward one side. As obstruction cleared, the fountain righted itself. Large volumes of spatter and pumice were blown into previously unscathed areas by the strong winds generated during and probably by the directed fountaining. Fire started by the hot spatter enveloped forest on and west of Pu'uhuluhulu, and several trees in Pauahi crater, 2.5 kilometers west of the vent, were set aflame by falling pumice. Vehicles parked in normally safe locations were sandblasted and their windshields were broken by thick wind-driven fallout. The lava went into two flows. They both changed from Pahoehoe to A'a, went over the Palis, did not quite make it to the ocean, but they went down the slopes there. So just a little bit more of insight into what Mauna Ulu eruptions were like. We're not going to go through every single episode, but I thought I'd cover the one low volume one and that one high volume one as well, right? High volume ones putting reticulite, which is our very frothy version of pumice here. This one was several kilometers downwind, caught in a tree. That's something we're more familiar with seeing nowadays as well. So that was the Mauna Ulu event. Pu'u'o event, episode 19. Let's cover that one briefly as well for you guys. So this is professional paper 1463. It covers episodes 1 through 20 of the Pu'u'o eruption. Now there were 44 high fountain episodes, right? The first one, episode 4, the last one being 47. These blank lines in here were times when it was too foggy or rainy or something like that. One of them was Hurricane Ignacio was nearby the island and dumping rain. And they just couldn't get any visuals of the fountain's heights to put on a graph here reliably. So, all right, looking just at the first 20 episodes of that one, episode 19. And let's just recap what this one was like. After episode 18 and continuing through the first half of May, lava at the top of the magma column was intermittently visible deep in the Pu'u'o pipe. Fume often obscured the view. Bursts of gas and spatter, as well as repeated, distinctive, low seismic bursts indicated gas piston activity. Beginning at 1:15 in the morning, May 16th, 1984, lava apparently rose high enough that intermittent periods of glow and minor spattering within the crater were visible from Camp E. That's one of the camps to the east of Pu'u'o. At about 5 a.m., the first of a series of short-lived Pahoehoe overflows was recorded. For the next 44 hours, overflows lasting from 3 to 30 minutes recurred at irregular intervals ranging in length from 4 minutes to several hours. In general, these overflows carried lava estimated rates of 1,000 to 10,000 cubic meters per hour. It's hard to compare that to the numbers we're using now without changing the units. Commonly, the rate gradually increased during an individual occurrence, with each overflow accompanied by a higher coincident tremor. The sequence is shown in figure 192, which we'll show you in a minute here. During periods of overflow, a quiet, partly crusted lava pond filled the crater. An intermittent low dome fountain put over the side of the conduit. The pond would slowly rise until it was high enough to overflow the spillway. At the end of the overflow, the pond would abruptly drop in level, commonly draining completely back into the upper part of the pipe. More of that gas pistoning. Such repeated effusive events created a stack of short Pahoehoe flows extending eastward from Pu'u'o. So just a little pause here to look at this image. The spillway chute at Pu'u'o after episode 18. Note the person standing in the spillway chute measuring what's going on in there. Now, just so you understand a little bit more, right? We're not talking about what we have right now with what's one a week. Theirs is about one a month. So it's not like they're running out there for just the one possible day. They're trying to watch this thing, but they are running onto the actual, looking down into the vent in that month window between episodes to see what's going on. So they're all up in here everywhere, and there's a person can't see too clearly, but to show the size of the spillway where the lava has been shooting out of as it's overflowing through there. Okay, a little more. 4 separate times, eruptive activity developed into brief occurrences of high fountaining, vigorous flow production, and high tremor, similar to the more typical style of pool eruptions thus far. During those intervals, a fountain as high as 100 meters or more played in the crater, with that estimated output in the spillway. Commonly, the fountain height would fluctuate over a period of 40 to 60 seconds from heights of less than 30 to 40 meters to 100 meters or more. As in episode 13, output of lava over the spillway, changing rapidly by a factor possibly of 2, fluctuated in concert with the changes in fountain height. So higher fountain, more lava, more coming through the spillway each time it happened. Brief interruptions in discharge and fountaining occurred during longer periods of high fountaining. These interruptions, recorded only during the first high fountain occurrence, lasted from a few seconds to 4 minutes. Resumption of discharge after each interruption was abrupt, and flow production and fountaining returned to full vigor almost instantaneously. A new flow front would surge rapidly down a channel that had drained moments before, and lava spread eastward within 1 to 1.5 kilometers of pool as broad overlapping sheets out there. The fourth and last high fountain event ended early on May 17th. Many low-level lava discharge events occurred during the ensuing 24 hours. A tube system developed close to the vent, and flows that issued from it formed thin fluid sheets that spread rapidly. One of them advanced approximately 1 kilometer in 36 minutes for an average velocity of 1.5 kilometers per hour. It's looking at maybe about 2 miles an hour, something like that, right? In sampling and measuring temperatures of this overflow sheet, were struck by the dense, degassed nature of the Pahoehoe. Within several minutes after its emplacement, we could walk on the Pahoehoe toes or on the sheet itself without breaking through shelly spots. This surprise is amusing to me. Like, they're out walking on it and they're like, and look, we didn't even fall through. So you can see what they're used to doing is walking on the stuff and falling through. In any case, come back to the text here. During the final hours of the episode, overflows and periods of recognizable fountains were smaller magnitude and more uniform than previously. In fact, the style evolved to one resembling gas piston activity. During nearly 3 hours of careful timing and observation, they saw that same cycle of first increased glow and spattering, overflow, low spattering and dome fountain, then drain back of the column with spatter and weakening glow. Right, all of that happening within this period of, looks like maybe 20 to 30 minutes, something like that. So here is the plot of activity during episode 19. And the way this works is full height bars are periods of high fountains and high lava output. Half height bars are periods of low level activity, including dome fountain and overflow. And dash bars are individual frames of strong glow only that may or may not reflect overflows through all the weather in our camera in the middle of the night, is what that's basically showing right there. Right? Data from on-site observations when available, and this is interesting, right? This has never been made public, but they have time-lapse camera records of lesser quality in terms of time control and completeness of the pool or fountains, which is what all this data is based off of. So. All right, so beginning of the eruption at night, not just maybe something starting up, but low activity. This is all stuff that we would be seeing here. They have a little bit of higher fountaining, but they're saying maximum fountain is 100 meters, but they're really telling us it was really 30 to 40, and once in a while it would shoot up to 100 or more. So I'm not sure. That's different ways of measuring things, right? How you can measure them. So there's the 1, 2, 3, 4, with other stuff in between, and lots of low-level activity. Mostly was low-level activity for all this episode of the pool eruption. So they fly over the following morning, and they see the magma column active 30 meters down in the pipe, persisting at those levels in a pipe until episode 20. Although fountains during episode 19 were never vigorous or sustained enough to significantly affect the exterior of Pu'u'u, this new style of generally slow discharge with prolonged rise and fall of a body of lava in a crater drastically modified the shape of the crater. Because before it was a deep bowl funnel-shaped interior, and afterwards all that filling and pistoning made a flat crater floor and filled that entire pit. So it was then smooth and sloped gently inward toward the open conduit from that point on. And that means that from that point on, the geologists were able to then walk up into there and walk down over that crusted cap of the hole, and they were to look down in it and stick a pipe in to measure the gas content. And there were some, I'm not sure if it's in this particular text here, but there is somewhere noted where they thought that the activity was kind of slow, so they walked up there to try to take a gas sample, and suddenly it started shooting in the air, and they had to run out of there, and it was super exciting. So those kind of stories leak into the text here time and time again. So, but not to cover all of Pu'u'u, there's a way more episodes than we can cover, and Mauna Ulu as well, but to point out these different episodes, some things being similar, right? Maybe you have mostly lava activity. I'm not sure. I try to look for whether we had higher bursts in our fountains. It was hard to tell from the time-lapse imagery without going back to the live feeds of that. So not quite sure it was quite the same there, right? And our stuff was continuous the entire time, and we didn't have these pauses like we had here at Pu'u'u. And Mauna Ulu wasn't quite the same either, right? So just to show how there are variations, and we're not quite exactly like either one of those other eruptions, but the key being that after those episodes, there were still high fountain events, 11 and 12 for Mauna Ulu, and Pu'u'u had, I don't know, something like 20 or 30 more of them after that. So that will be how we wrap up our awareness presentation here. I see we've gone a little bit over time, but I wanted to just add a little bit more of that context, and I'll pass it back to you, Dane. Any questions?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think we can make up for it here because I only got one question for you lined up. If you want to go ahead and do that one.
Yeah.
From Chuck asks, so there's as much caldera floor building going on under the crust as above?
I think it's there's a good amount. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So I'll play this thing again, right? I don't have here with me the full sequence since the start of the eruption, but yeah, there's a good amount of the crater floor being lifted by lava injecting below it, which is actually not an unusual thing. They described that happening in a light crater at Mauna Ulu back in the 1960s and 70s as well. And we saw it happening at other summit eruptions of Kilauea before this one as well. But yeah, it's a good question, and it's an important thing to notice as well, right? And that's part of this interesting dynamic of why is it doing what it's doing? We don't really quite know, but one of the variables is that there's a connection into this subcrustal area that can inject lava and ooze it up on the far side if you have enough stuff going on. How it all works together, we're still untangling that, I think.
Right, and that's the interesting bit too, is when it stops, that point it starts inflating as well, and the flows don't like to get over to where the bulge is now as much, type of thing. I don't know, it's just a lot of interesting bit going on.
I mean, I think there were some big flows that made it over there, but it has to be, like the whole landscape is changing, right? We're talking about, what's interesting is in both Mauna Ulu and Pu'u'u were East Rift high fountain events, and they would go and map out how far did lava flows run down the coast and how thick are they, and that was how they got the volume, was from each draping of flow, not unlike our youth education lava flow board kind of thing, right? Mm-hmm. Each different run, they'd go and like trace it all out and figure out how thick it was and get a volume from that. And we have all that happening all within this summit crater, which is pretty amazing. The footprint's 800 acres just about now, right? So that's a huge area to be moving lava across. And so, yeah, there's the actual topography is changing as far as where flows go. Now they become high ground, and the next flow goes next to that or on the edge of it. And yeah, pretty interesting, constantly changing. One thing that is, maybe I didn't say explicitly here, is most of the time they're linking Fountain Heights to the amount of lava that's coming out. So there is still a lot of lava in this eruption, but I wonder, was it a little bit less in the previous episodes because it didn't get to the high fountain phase? How does the lava injected underneath the crust compare to the previous events as well? It's not
And
questions I
even,
have answers to.
right, throwing back to 2018, the biggest volumes wasn't the highest fountaining part, in my opinion. Like the highest volume was when it got into that steady state and it had widened the mouth, so to speak. So it was a huge volume,
Right.
but not
Right.
super tall fountaining, essentially.
Right, but that wasn't episodic at all, so it's hard to compare
Right.
apples to oranges there, right? What I can say is that Mauna Ulu, for example, if we come back to this graph, right, and we say, okay, well, 10 was low, but it came back for 11 and 12. What happened after that? After that came 2 years of steady state, not episodic, not high fountaining, but continuing eruption in Mauna Ulu. So it can be that something changes towards this continuous eruption of what you might have seen in Leilani in 2018, or many other eruptions that we've talked about in the past as well. The episodic ones are the rarer ones here. And so there is this pattern that you can switch out of being episodic and go back to continuous. How does that happen? We don't have that many examples, really, right? Mauna Ulu and Pu'u both did it. And you can see here, Mauna Ulu had this 1-3 from the end, and Pu'u, wrong one. Pu'u had a more steady decline. Never really crashed down to less than 100 meters, but it definitely declined from 400 meters down to 200 meters over those final 10 episodes or so. And so that's something to consider. And then it also turned continuous afterwards. So that's what comes after these, is not end of eruption, but a change in the style of eruption to where it's just oozing out all the time.
Right. Very interesting. We did have a donation come through from Don, $5. Appreciate it there, Don. And then he follows it up by saying, it's like a rising crust pizza with stuffed crust.
Yes, yeah, Pele's pizza, right? She's toppings on top and she's rising it from below.
That's kind of good, yeah. All right, appreciate it there, Don. And yeah, I think that does it for our questions today. Appreciate everybody that tuned in. We will be back Thursday, 5 p.m. our standard time, unless something happens.
Sounds great. Mahalo Dane, mahalo Lou on the back end. And yeah, we'll see. 5 to 8 days. If that pattern holds, if we have something else happening next week, Tuesday, we'll see what we can do for you guys and keep our pattern going here as long as it takes. All right. So just a reminder, we do this. Our mission is to improve disaster preparedness and response through education, volcano education in this case here. So our real goal is to help our community be aware of the hazards, and when our hazards are reduced, take it as a real learning opportunity of how the volcano works, so we can really be there for each other if there is a need in the future lavas in communities, and we can not focus so much on why are things happening, but what we do in response and how we do it as best as possible, so we can have the least impact and best resilience possible here. All right, spiel is over. I'm off the soapbox. Until next week, everybody. From a nonprofit HVERI, Hawaiian Volcano Education Resilience Institute, for Lou Ettore and Dane DuPont, I am Philip Ong. Until next week, everyone. Aloha.